So what I had hoped was that people would actually do the homework assignment that I gave them. And I'm going to bet that not one single person did. Oh, Mary Camille did. Anybody else do the homework assignment?
I'm doing.
Did, and Lewis did. Okay. So what I would really like to do, and Shayla, when I'll save you for last, what I would really like to do is I'd like to hear, what it was that you chose to observe or explore, or what, I don't know exactly what we want to say about this. And then I'd be very interested. I'll make some comments about that, but I'm wondering if other people have comments. And if they do, please unmute yourself and either contribute your thoughts to what that person has had to say, or ask questions, or whatever the case may be. This actually can be very rich. I've done this with one of my university classes. It was not a class on Buddhist Dharma. It was not a class on religious philosophy at all. It was actually a class on environmental ethics. But I had people do this assignment, and they had very little exposure to Asian ways of thinking about things, although I was bringing that into the class. And some of them came up with some very interesting experiences they shared, which were very significant for them from the point of view of developing a new way of thinking about their relationship with the environment around them. And I will share one of those at the end as my contribution to this homework assignment. I'm going to plagiarize what one of my students did, which is he shared the experience of showering. He talked about showering, which I thought, wow, that's, I would have never thought of such a thing, but actually it was great. And it was a very important thing for him. And it obviously stuck with me. So how's about we start with, I'll put Mary Camille on the spot. Yeah, oh no, she's, and why don't you tell us, what you did for your homework assignment, Mary? Now I have to remember what the homework assignment was. Okay, so we were talking about this section in Lama Zopa's book about making life meaningful. And the section was, he talked about walking, and he talked about walking with emptiness, which is thinking about emptiness when you're walking with bodhicitta, thinking about bodhicitta when you're walking, walking with mindfulness, obviously in every respect, but he gave a number of different examples and exercises that one could do. And I talked fairly extensively about some experience that I had doing that sort of thing. And I can talk about that some more tonight because I can riff on that for a while. I did a multi-class series for San Francisco Zen Center, basically talking about just this subject for, I think, 15 weeks. So there's a lot there. It just gets deeper and deeper as you go. So now that I've reminded you of the homework assignment, which you said you did, if you don't have anything to say, that's all right,
No, I do. I actually have it written down. I have a couple things. I was just a little nervous to go first.
Why is that? We're all friends here.
So my homework assignment. I have an aunt. My Aunt Mary Lou is in a facility. She had a stroke last March.
Oh.
She's 85 years old and she's paralyzed from the waist down.
Oh.
And her speech and her mind, sometimes she's really lucid and sometimes she's not. But ever since last March, I call every single day. My mom goes to the nursing home. It's my mom's sister every day. she's a two-person assist, so they can't bring her home. And I actually thought about moving back to Ohio to help, but it's really complicated. And but anyways, my aunt, she's always been single. She's never been married. She doesn't have any kids. She always loved Walt Disney and Harlequin romances, and a very devout Catholic. But she really doesn't have any friends or family other than my immediate family to visit her. And so I call every day, and most of the time I'm like entertainment or distraction, and sometimes she's coherent and sometimes she's not quite. And she doesn't want to talk about God or the saints anymore. She doesn't believe in God because God wouldn't have done this to her, and this was why would she be? So I just call every day, and I try to be really positive. And so David, when you gave the homework last week, I really kept thinking about the carrots and the garden. And so I thought, well, how can I change when I call? Like, what would be really meaningful without imposing myself on her? And so it was really amazing. I started with, because this is what inspired me from the class last week, was about kindness. So I was thinking about how kind she was to me when I was 17. Right out of high school, I got a job in downtown Cleveland working at a bank, and I didn't know how to drive to downtown Cleveland. I didn't know how to drive on the freeways. So I took the bus, and my aunt never drove. So I drove to her house, and I took the bus with her to downtown Cleveland. And she showed me where to go to the bank I was working at, and or I got the job at. And so anyways, when I called her this week, the first thing I said, when I call the nursing home every day when my mom's there, my mom's cell phone, she gives it to my aunt. And then I said, I was thinking about how kind you were to me. She's like, when? And I just told her about taking the bus and how kind she was to me. And then I said, can I read you a prayer? And I don't know the author, is what I told her, but I read to her the Shantideva. And David, I'm not sure how to pronounce it's the dedication prayer, the Bodhicitta. How do you pronounce that?
I'm not sure what the word is that you're wanting to have pronounced.
Oh, but anyways, it's like the St. Francis prayer. They
Okay.
all everywhere. So David, it was just really amazing. So I read that to her this week. And then I also do trivia with her because she always liked trivia. So I'll ask her, Mary Lou, how many people, like, what were the original Texas Rangers? Or tell me what year Walt Disneyland opened. And so one day this week, I read to her the Shantideva prayer, and she said, how are you doing? And most of the time, I'm always super positive, but I was kind of having a rough day one day this week, and I just told her, Mary Lou, I'm having a kind of a hard day today. And after I read the prayer, I wrote this down. This is what she told me. This was so amazing. She said, sit in a chair, close your eyes and meditate. She said it crystal clear, like her speech wasn't mumbled or anything. And I felt like that there was just like this amazing divine connection of emptiness, kindness, like dependent arising. Like I don't know how to put it all together, David, but that's the strongest thing that came to me this week. And it was really intentional, trying to make a more of a deeper connection with her mind. And it just was beautiful that she said those words. I've never heard her utter the word meditate.
That's quite fascinating. It's quite fascinating. I don't actually have any way to respond to that. That's really very beautiful. I mean, well, I don't know. I mean, one thought that I have is that, your mind and her mind are connected. They have to be connected in all kinds of different ways that are kind of incomprehensible to us to know that sort of thing. I mean, with Kay and myself, things like this happen all the time, and it's okay. I mean, we've been married for almost 30, well, we've been together almost 35 years. I'm not sure how many of those years we've been married. She's sitting here and she doesn't seem to be pissed off about that. But anyhow, and it just happens all the time that she'll be thinking something and I'll say something about it. Or she'll be thinking something and I'll do something and it's related to what she's thinking about, or the reverse, So, I mean, the bad news is neither of us can get away with anything, but the good news is that kind of connection that's there that is actually kind of hard to, if you tried to explain it, if you kind of wrapped yourself around some sort of Buddhist metaphysics to explain it, it would just sound weird. But it's true because it happens, like what happened with you, that kind of connectivity. It's kind of amazing. And I'm sorry, what?
I forgot one other piece of this. So I did go, with the whole COVID thing, I haven't been able to travel, but I did go back in September purposely to visit her in the nursing home and to drive my mom there, and to give my sisters a break. But there's other cousins, there's other people around, but they don't visit her. And this is what broke my heart too, is she said, I mean, and this is her mind, she said everyone hates her. Because I said, besides my immediate sisters, I asked her about other cousins or people wanting to visit her. She said, they all hate me. I don't want them coming here. So when she had told me that, I kept thinking, I just want to tell her how kind, fill her mind with memory, like how kind she was to me, taking, and just to, so I don't know, I'm probably using up too much time here, but
right. How is it possible that according to Zoom, your mic is muted, but I can hear you perfectly well? Could everybody else hear Mary? Yeah, that's pretty strange.
Oh no, I was very swift. I shut it off.
No, your mic, I heard you just now, and your mic looks like it's muted. So there's something very mysterious going on here. So maybe, mysterioso, also your relationship with your aunt, very mysterioso, huh? Anyway, from the point of view of dependent arising, I don't think, I don't think dependent arising really explains that kind of relationship. I think that you can find things in Tantra and Vajrayana that would explain it, but I don't see anything in the realm of dependent arising that would explain it. But maybe I'm just being short-sighted. I mean, does anybody else have any thought about that, on how they might see that? I only have so much insight, No comments, no hands raised. Okay. Well, thank you for sharing that. I mean, that's pretty intimate, I mean, it's really great that you would have that connection. It's really great that you would call her every day.
Well, I thought the dependent arising would be because of how everything unfolded. And then her making that comment to me, I thought in some way that was part of it.
Well, you'd have to explain in a little bit more detail what you mean, because I'm still not catching it. I'm sure you can. No, you're not going to, you can't. Okay. All right, well, we'll leave it at that then. Thank you. I'm sorry that you felt put on the spot by being the first person up. But you're co-host, so there you go. You're stuck. Okay, there you go. So does somebody else have something that they want to share? or they're willing to share even if they don't want to? Something other homework assignment comments? Oh, nobody's going to say anything, right? I can see this. Well, nuts. Okay, so Shayla, oh, okay, Lewis, thank you.
I didn't
With
do.
you. Your microphone says you're muted, but I can hear you perfectly well.
Okay, I don't know why it says I'm muted. On my picture, my icon, I can't. It doesn't say muted.
Okay, all right.
But I tried to do the homework with the walking.
Yeah.
And it wasn't. It just wasn't working out. So I decided to go ahead and in the book a little further, and I tried doing some eating changes to the way I'm eating. And I tried, what I did was now before I start the meal, after I make the offering at the altar, I tell myself that I'm consuming the meal for the sustenance, both spiritual and physical, for all the sentient beings that live in my body. And then I also say that may all the joy and the nourishment also be turned into nectar for my root guru, for her sustenance. And then I tell myself, I, the one making this offering, I'm getting flustered. I say to myself that I, the one making this offering, am not truly existent. The offering itself is not truly existent. And the beings I'm making the offering to are not truly existent. So I've been doing this like for about 4 or 5 days. And I feel a lot more relaxed. I don't know. It's just, it's changed something within myself that I don't know. I don't know how to describe it, but I've noticed a definite change in the way I approach things now.
That's interesting. You know, I think that a lot of times, in my experience anyway, I'll say put it this way, when something new begins to develop in me and I'm going through some kind of a change, I can't exactly explain what it is. It takes a while for my sort of self-conscious mind to be able to formulate some sort of thoughts about it, you know, words, like put the experience into words, that as the experience is first developing, the words don't seem adequate to encode the experience. I'm becoming friends with a theoretical physicist who works up at Santa Fe Institute, for folks that know anything about Santa Fe Institute. But he's also a Buddhist teacher, which is quite fascinating, and he has been for many years. So he likes words like encode. But, you know, I like that. That's a great word, you know, to take our experience and, you know, put it into language is to encode it. But then it's also separate from the experience at that point, isn't it? So, you know, when the experience is first developing, it's fresh and it's vital and it's intense. And I think sometimes when we put it into language, it loses some of that. So it sounds like that you're at that place where everything is fresh and wonderful.
I think one of the words that comes to my mind while you were talking, when you were talking about encoding, is I feel more outside of myself, more not so restricted, not so tight, more looser,
Right.
more in touch with my environment.
Yeah. So do you have a sense that your boundaries are kind of expanded a bit?
Yes, a little bit. Yeah.
See, in touch with the environment, that's very much what I experience when I do this kind of practice. Because for myself, I find that, I go through my day and I experience a lot of tunnel vision. All our sense organs are in the front of our face, right? We kind of we're moving like this, and it's harder to remember what's out here or back there or up there or down there. We're so like this. And this kind of practice seems to, open up the space a bit and reconnect. And that's where I've found it particularly powerful. And for me, as I think I indicated last week, if I can remember what I was even talking about last week, when I do this kind of meditation in relationship with food, cooking, eating, it's very, very strong. And well, I don't want to get coarse about this, but one of the things I did mention last week, we talk about the way things come to us, that things originate in dependence on causes and conditions, other stuff. So the tree grows in dependence upon earth, water, sun, carbon dioxide, all the stuff that's needful for the tree to grow. But those are all conditions. The actual cause is the seed, but that's getting fairly philosophical. It's interesting how, for me anyway, it's an ongoing challenge to remember the other side of things. Where is it all going? What are the consequences of what's happening in what I'm doing here? What are the consequences? Where do things go? I remember when I was getting interested in ecological thinking once again. This is something that's interested me for many years. I wrote about Buddhism and ecology in the mid-'80s. Nobody wanted to hear anything about it back then, because there were implications that people didn't want to deal with, didn't want to think about. But now it's in everybody's face, so it's not a big deal. But anyway, there was a book that I ran into called Watch Your Wake. So you know what a wake is when you're on the water, the wake of a boat. It's what's behind you. Watch what you're leaving behind you. Watch where things go. And that watch your wake has been kind of a catchword of mine. So that leads to some very interesting kind of stuff, especially in regards to food is one. Because there are places where things go that we don't tend to think about. I do, because we're not too far from the Santa Fe City sewage treatment plant. And if the wind is blowing in the right direction, I remember where things go in a certain very concrete way, but it's good. It's actually very good to remember these things. I'll just sort of leave it at that. The other side to it is, of course, that we can be intentional. And when you described your meditative process, you described this quality of intentionality in which you could see or desired to have the food beneficial to be for more than yourself. And I think Lama Zopa talks about this someplace. I don't think he talks about it in this book, but he talks about the way in which merit is magnified by thinking this kind of way. And merit is something we don't tend to think about very much either, I think that people who grow up in a Buddhist world tend to think about it more than people who grow up in the Western world. That it's said that there are two wings to the bird of enlightenment. One is wisdom, and the other is merit. And merit means good karma, positive energy, good habit patterns, good intention, to be beneficial. And it's kind of, I think for Westerners, I mean, certainly for me, but I think for Westerners in general, it's sometimes very hard to connect the acquisition of merit or the cultivation of merit or the generation of merit with one's realization and with one's development. It's hard to see how these things connect. Maybe I'll do a long riff on that next week, rather than sort of get distracted by it this week. But it's really quite fascinating. In the meditation that I do, which is my sort of basic spiritual practice, if I do it really quickly, there's a sadhana for this visualization that I do. A sadhana is like a ritual that you go through, a visualized ritual that you go through in highest yoga tantra. And if I do it really, 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 really quickly, it takes 90 minutes. And if I don't do it really, really quickly because, I'm having some interesting experiences, it can take 2-3 hours. The point is that the first part of this, when I first began doing it, I thought the first part of this was not useful. It was all about making praises and offering blessings and making donations visualized and gifts and offerings and doing self-purification. I thought, this is kind of, what's the point to this? Let's get down to the self-visualization and the practice of oneself as a bodhisattva, as a deity bodhisattva. And it took about 15 years. This is how dense I am. It took about 15 years before I realized that the only way that the second part of the practice, which was the visualizing oneself as a bodhisattva deity, the only way that could have any power was because of the meritorious energy that I accumulated in the first part of the sadhana. And that was the reason that the person who composed the sadhana had put it there, which is that in order to accomplish certain things, we have to develop a positive energy, a meritorious energy. It's very hard for us as Westerners to get that really deeply, I think. That's pretty much my experience. So in what you were doing, Lewis, that was built in right away. And so I'm not surprised to hear that there was some sort of positive outcome that you were experiencing right away also. In this tradition, we're really following Lama Tsongkhapa in the tradition that is the FPMT tradition. Lama Tsongkhapa is the founder, basically, of the tradition. And he did things like make 100,000 mandala offerings to acquire the merit that he needed to move forward. That's a lot of offerings. Sometimes they say that you need to do 100,000 prostrations to purify yourself. And wow, that's kind of astonishing. I don't know to what extent any of that stuff is true. I've always cribbed on all of this. Once Kay, my wife, was feeling a little awkward about the fact that we were doing these practices and we weren't doing the initial purifications until she asked our Lama about it. And he said, "Oh no, you don't have to worry about that. You don't need to do that. You did all that stuff in previous lifetimes. You don't have to do it in this lifetime." And I thought, wow, well, I hope it's true. But anyway, he just let me off the hook because I don't want to do 100,000 prostrations. What the heck? I was 20 years younger than her, 30 years younger than. My back might have been able to take it. I don't know, but holy cow. So anyhow, I wandered off on that theme because it's something worth giving consideration to. And I think I'll come back to it next week. Thank you, Lewis. Thank you for sharing. I talked a long time. You didn't talk for a very long time.
That's fine with me.
I didn't think you were going to mind too much. Teachers do that. Professors do it. I mean, we profess. Anybody else have anything to offer from their homework they'd like to offer?
Yeah, I can go next, but before I go, I think Colin had his hands up after Mary. So I just want to give Colin a chance to speak. Right, Colin?
Oh, thank you. Yeah, no, I was just gonna try to maybe like tease apart a little bit of what Mary was saying, but we've already kind of, I think, moved past that.
I mean, if you have some insight that you think would be helpful to Mary, please share it.
I don't know that it would necessarily be helpful. I think like maybe for my own edification to try to understand like the link she was trying to make with like her experience with I'm sorry, your aunt.
Her aunt.
Yeah. About the interdependent arising of that. And I think maybe just in this maybe I was trying to understand it through like sort of the interpenetrated contingencies of everything under that metaphysic, like because it is like everything is leaning on everything else. There is I don't know, like, and maybe this is why you said certain like tantric traditions might have something like more particular to say about that, because there is such a like conception of like focus transmission rather than just sort of interdependent arising in general being this like giant network of contingency. I don't know. That's not really to say anything other than maybe I was trying to work through a little bit of that.
Okay.
In response to what she said.
Okay. Are you thinking of some of the quantum theories, quantum physics theories about the way in which things connect at a distance?
Yeah, somewhat. I mean, I think that's maybe like maybe a slightly more helpful language for someone who comes from our culture where everything is very sort of causally viewed.
Hmm. They use the quantum physicists. I've been reading about this recently. Quantum physicists use the term entanglement, that some atomic particles are entangled with each other. And there's some very mysterious stuff that goes on. So I always hesitate to try and connect Buddhism and physics when I basically know a little bit about Buddhism and basically nothing about physics, but I'll go there anyway because there's some fascinating stuff, and maybe this is relevant in some way. I don't know, but I'll just toss it out there, which is that there are subatomic particles that they say are entangled with each other, and they act upon each other at a distance. So if you have two particles, I don't know what kind of particles they're even talking about. I don't know the names of these things, but if you have one subatomic particle on one side of the universe spinning clockwise and another subatomic particle on the other side of the universe spinning counterclockwise, or also spinning clockwise. If for some reason the spin on one changes, then immediately the spin on the other one will change, which is an action which is faster than the speed of light, which is theoretically not supposed to be possible. So that's why they talk about these things being entangled. So as a metaphor at any rate, to talk about the way in which our minds connect with each other, if something happens in my mind, why would it be a big surprise that something else would happen in my wife's mind? Because our minds are pretty entangled. I mean, all of us are entangled from our minds to, well, everything, So maybe it's just a good metaphor. I don't know, but it's pretty interesting. It struck me. They can't explain it. They don't have a way to, the physicists don't have a way to explain it as far as I know. Maybe they do with mathematics, and I don't have a mathematical mind, so I'll never understand it.
Actually, I think math is probably one of the limitations of understanding that, because most of our understanding of math relies on indeterminacy. Like infinity in most equations has infinitely different values. Like certain formulas like use infinity within the formula, and it sort of like implies a certain sort of infinite value, whereas like it might sort of function differently in a different equation. So like,
Oh, interesting.
yeah, like 0 and infinity are both kind of like black boxes, kind of.
So they're not constants, is what you're saying.
Right. So ultimately, all of our math in some way or another like leads to this indeterminacy, which, I mean, that's very like, obviously that's very Eastern or present in Eastern philosophy, but even like in the Western philosophical tradition, like it's very like Hegelian, that like contradiction and indeterminacy is fundamental to anything that can be called truth. Like, and retroactivity is the process of coming to truth. You can't understand the beginning until you get to the end, kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe that's like a little too
Far, too
too
far.
yeah.
Well, okay, I'll put it this way. It's all a big mystery. And it seems to me that in my lifetime, coming to terms with the fact that in the end, it's a big mystery has been part of my growing process and getting to the place of being comfortable with not knowing many things and not being bothered by the fact that I don't know those things has been very helpful. Because, I mean, our minds naturally, I think, especially if we're educated, we want to know this, that, and the other thing. And guess what? I think there's a lot of stuff that we can't possibly know. I mean, I don't know, maybe my philosopher colleagues at the university would consider that pretty outrageous, or maybe they would consider that just makes a whole lot of sense. I don't know. I don't talk to them about these things, so I'm not sure what they would think about it. So we don't have lots of time. Does anybody else want to share their homework? And if not, I'll share something of my own.
I'll go ahead.
Oh,
'Cause
please do.
Yeah, I did prepare, and I just want to first of all like apologize because I'm not good at explaining things, so I'm not good at talking about it. But anyway, so I start with that, and I also want to comment on Mary because, interesting enough, I wasn't expecting Mary's story, and I have to say, I enjoyed listening to it because I felt it was very personal, and trying to figure out where depending arising in. And the first thing that came to my mind is maybe it's the ailment or the old age of her aunt's condition that made her think about depending arising in that sense, that the conditions is that she has a relative that's very sick and that she's very close to, that made her think there is a relationship there. And I have to add that the dedication by Shantideva is one thing that I discovered for myself, how powerful that prayer is, that the first time I heard it, it just never left me, even though I don't know all the words. So I really appreciate Mary sharing that. And then to piggyback on Lewis, I had the same thought. I thought, for this assignment, I mean, we do so many things every day, and walking is another experience that I do every day. Eating is another one. And then I had the third that's more personal, is that it's like I volunteer at the hospital, not as a medical thing, but just to assist on the front desk where they give me a fancy name. They call me the ambassador. I'm not an ambassador. Basically, I'm a runner. I basically take people from one place to another where they want to go to, whether it's registration. And the history with the depending arising there is that I've been volunteering for the hospital for many, many years because I'm a retired art teacher and I'm still a working artist. for my own interest. So anyway, and each individual experience have its own level of, how depending arising affects me and how it affects afterwards. And some of them are stronger in one area and weaker in the area. For example, when I went for a walk, you told me to meditate and observe. So the first thing that came to my mind, because I live close to river path, Santa Fe River Path, is like, someone made this available for me, from the tiniest little pebbles on the side to whoever paved the way for me to walk and decide how this whole structure is going to look like, is giving me that wonderful enjoyment. That's why I keep going back to walk, sunset, sunrise. I mean, someone had the vision or have the qualities to create these wonderful environment for me to walk and enjoy. So I'm very grateful for those anonymous people. I don't know who, of course, the city, but I don't know which individual. I mean, from the houses that are on the path, I mean, it's all beautiful. I mean, someone has to make it interesting for me to enjoy that walk. So that's the depending arising on other people affecting me and making my life quite pleasant and make me meditate and be very grateful and think about, I'm not, we all depend on each other. And on the path, and I said, well, how do I give back? How does other people depend on my presence? And the only way I could think of is like, I don't know these people. I mean, some people will, with mask on, you can't smile and greet people, so you don't know the reaction. So the only way I could bring back with that or give back is I say to myself, may they be happy, may they be enjoying as much as I'm enjoying it, and that whatever happens after our meeting, their life will be meaningful and they'll have a wonderful evening and a wonderful life. So that's the only way I can justify not my existence, but my contribution to what I'm trying to do as a Buddhist.
Right.
So that's the walking part. So I'll jump straight to the hospital, and that one, I think it's more concrete for me what I gained from them. First of all, when you experience people who have passed away or who are sick, you become very sensitive to people who are going to the hospital because they're there for a reason. Either they have ailments. And so my job, aside from running, is to make them as pleasant as possible before they even start anything. So I talk to them, I give them a very pleasant kind of aura and say, good morning, how was your day? What you think, just conversation, because these are all people I've never met. And so you experience people who are, even though they don't say it, you could see in their presence that they're nervous. They're feeling a lot of pain or anxiety because they're not going to hospital for fun. They're going there for a good reason.
Yeah.
To deal with their health situation. So I try to give back to them some kind of calmness and some kind of, feeling that, things going to be okay. Though I can't tell for sure. I can't, I don't have the power to say they're going to be okay, but at least I wish them a beautiful day, and hopefully, they'll have a good experience at the hospital and continue on. And so that's my take on, hopefully they'll get something from me, and that's the relationship. I think that's pretty much what I'm thinking of. I think that's maybe there's. Oh yeah, I want to add. I've always loved quotes, and when I was doing my job, and even my life today, I always thought of Tennessee Williams' Streetcar Named Desire, where she said, "I dependent on the kindness of strangers," and that quote makes so much sense today for me. I mean, I always loved that play. I love her saying that. I love the whole scenario, but it's more it's a lot more meaningful to me that, strangers is as good as enemies as friends. They are as important as anybody in my life anyway. Okay, I'll shut up. That's it.
Thank you for sharing that. You know, to segue on that, I mean, I've heard many lamas say that, and this is actually in the mind training exercises, that one's enemies are great teachers, but one's friends are great teachers too. You know, the mind training doesn't so much say that. Seems to me that what you're doing is wonderful. And to speak from personal experience, I would get lost in the St. Christus Hospital if it wasn't for folks like you getting me from registration to wherever I go for testing. I haven't been admitted to the hospital for anything, but I go there for various kinds of tests, or maybe to see my one of my doctors, something like that. And it's a labyrinth. I mean, to get from one place to another, if you don't know the hospital, would be hopeless and incredibly stressful. So you have my gratitude for doing that, even if you haven't been the one that led me from the first floor to the, echocardiogram, wherever it was, or that kind of thing. But gratitude is an interesting, you mentioned gratitude, and gratitude is a very, really interesting practice. It's an amazingly powerful. Maybe I find it powerful because feeling entitled, to use that terminology, has been one of my great faults in my life. I mean, at one time, one of my lamas, Locho Rinpoche, through a translator, told me I was arrogant, which came as a huge shock to me. But when I thought about it, I thought, I'm not quite sure what he was saying in Tibetan. And I'm sure arrogant was part of it, but I also thought entitled was probably part of it, And I think people tend to feel entitled to certain things. It's like, I'm an American citizen, or I live in Santa Fe, therefore it's my right to have X, Y, or Z, because I'm here, I'm me, so I should get it. And anyway, I'm the center of the universe. Didn't you know that? As one of my friends pointed out, the obvious fallacy of that, you sit in a classroom and ask people, do you feel like you're the center of the world? And all the students will think about it and they'll have to honestly say, yes, I do. And then you have to say, well, look at the person next to you. If they're the center of the world and you're the center of the world, there's something wrong with this way of thinking about things, because we can't all be the center of the world. Apart from some mathematical theories about there not being one center, there being multiple centers, but we'll set that aside. Colin's smiling. I thought to find that kind of amusing. Anyway, one of the things that comes out of this practice is if you can yoke it to gratitude, as you do when you do the walking, then that's really quite extraordinary, because for one thing, in my experience, it plops me into the here and now. It gets me away from my mind typically being stuck in the past or the future, as I think is the case with many people. It brings me into now, and it feels so good, actually, to feel grateful for whatever. So I really try and do that, and to sort of jump into the kind of the shower example that this one student used when I gave this assignment in this class on ecological philosophy, or the philosophy of ecology. I don't remember what the heck it was called. He talked about taking a shower. He was in Portland, Oregon, and the water in Portland usually comes from a lake up near Mount Hood, which is a maybe extinct volcano, or maybe not extinct. It's not entirely clear. Anyhow, it's wonderfully clear, pure water. And then it's piped down to Portland. So he was taking a shower and he was thinking about this, and he was thinking about the water coming from the lake and the rain raining on Mount Hood, and how it originally was, moisture in the air from the ocean, which is not really very far away from Portland to the west. And he was thinking about that. He didn't think too much about what happened when the water went down the drain, which I would have encouraged him to do. But because, as I said, it's good to think about where it's going and where it's all coming from, because we're part of a continuity, a flow. So he was talking about being grateful for having the water to shower and not wanting to waste it. And then he got into thinking about different shower heads, and maybe he better turn off the water when he soaks himself up. And he went on and on about this, and it had really kind of changed the way he related to the environment around him. It changed the way he related to Portland and to the environment around Portland. And the more appreciative he was of having the shower, the more appreciative he was of Portland, and the more grateful he was to be in a place that had such good water, because so many places don't have such good water. And then he got to thinking about how he was taking a shower and it was a hot water shower, and how wonderful that was. And he's Chinese, and he was a Chinese student who was, he was in the United States to be a student. He was a Chinese person. And so he reflected on the fact that he could take a shower in hot water, but his parents had grown up in a time when there was no such thing as a hot water shower or bath in the part of China where they were, because everyone was so poor. If you wanted to clean yourself, you didn't have hot water to do it. So he got to thinking about the gratitude that he had for the apartment building he was in that had these great big hot water boilers in it. And then that led him to thinking about, well, how is this water heated up? And what kind of responsibilities did he have about this? So he got to thinking not only about how much water he was using, so maybe he would stop letting the water run when he was soaping himself down, right? He'd get wet and soap himself down, then he'd turn the water back on, which I never do because I hate to be cold. So it's my indulgence. I'd get cold in the shower if that happened, and it'd be all over. I wouldn't be showering. I'd smell really bad because I hate getting cold. LA boy, as I said earlier. Anyway, he got to thinking about all the energy that's used to heat up the water that he was, having this hot water shower. And then he thought about, where did that come from? Where did the natural gas come from that was heating up the water? And he didn't know. He had no idea. So he set himself out to study, to learn, about all of this. Where did the natural gas come from that got to Portland, that heated up the hot water for a shower? And that led him into all kinds of sort of interesting explorations. And again, it changed his relationship with Portland. But it was all a matter of gratitude, because then he started feeling grateful for the people who work for whatever the gas company is in Portland. I don't actually know. The people who kept the gas flowing, and the people who were responsible for this, that, and the other thing. But then he got guilty again, because he thought about the gas being pumped out of the ground, and got to thinking about greenhouse emissions, and he went on down that line, but he couldn't figure a way to get out of it, because he decided he wanted to have a hot water shower. So then he had to make some decisions about his impact on the environment and what he was willing to accept as a biped living in this world, and what he was not willing to accept. So that led him into all kinds of moral issues, right? But what it didn't lead him into was, it didn't lead him into a Buddhist way of thinking about that. because Lewis has really come up with his experience with a way of dealing with the question of our relationship to the earth, which can't help but be exploitative in a certain way. So then the question is, how do we make the best use of what we're taking from the earth? And so this gets to the other end of not the equation, but the flow of dependent arising, in the sense of we are a condition or a cause for something happening, you know. So how are we going to deal with that? And the Buddhist way of doing that is through dedication. And Lama Zopa talks about that in this section, if you want to go back to it. And this is very strong stuff, because he doesn't use the term guilt anyplace. But if you're an aware person living in this world of 2021, using the resources of the earth, the question of guilt is going to come up. And the question of responsibility is going to come up, unless you're utterly unconscious, which is the convenient way out. But I don't expect anybody here is going to take that way out. So dedication of merit and thinking about these possible ways of making use of resources in ways that have implications for broader than just oneself is worth looking at. So that's where I pretty much want to leave things this evening, unless someone has a question or an observation, to reflect on that and actually go back to this section in Lama Zopa's book where he talks about this sort of thing, and to give some consideration to it, because it's very powerful. I'm not saying that I'm good at doing it. I'm as selfish as anybody else and as self-centered as anybody else, and perhaps more so. Certainly quite unconscious most of the time, as far as I can see. But these practices are very, very extraordinary. So I'm going to recommend them to you. Any more thoughts about where we're at here? Questions, observations? Otherwise, I'd like to wind things up, because that's a good place to end this session. We'll come back next week, pick up at that point. Anything? We're okay? All right. Well, as always, thank you so much for coming, because I enjoy doing this. And yes, Victor, thank you. And Mary Camille. If you weren't here, I couldn't be here doing this. And, you know, I'd be, actually what I'd be doing is I'd be reading a novel that Anil and Janice gave me called The Dalai Lama's Cat, which is incredibly charming. It's an incredibly charming story. It's about life around the Dalai Lama in his offices from the point of view of a cat, of an imagined cat. I don't know how much the author actually knows about being around the private offices and residences of His Holiness. Some things he writes ring true in my experience, and other things are, I don't know, maybe things have changed since the last time I was there. That doesn't really sound like my own experience, but it's been 20 years since the last time I was in that environment. So things change, as we know. Anyway, if you want to read a charming book, The Dalai Lama's Cat. Anyway, thank you very much, Anil and Janice. I've been enjoying it. So I'll see you all next week, I hope. Have a good one.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
Dave.